Hello, beloved. Welcome back to What's Up Wednesday. We're actually online this week. Sorry I missed you last week. The technical difficulties were beyond my control, so I'm happy to be back with you this week. And picking up where we left off, talking about difficult decisions. This is actually our third week of talking about difficult decisions. This is difficult decisions part three, and we're still sort of wrestling with how we make difficult decisions, how we kind of not just pandemic decisions, but difficult decisions. So so I hope you're well. I hope that whenever you're watching this, whether it's live or later, I hope you're well. Know that I'm praying for you, for all of us. And know that you can always reach out. You can reach out through the comments. You can reach out through Messenger. You can reach out, and I'll be happy to walk with you as we all journey together through this unknown territory. So recently, we've all begun to see more opening up plans, reopening plans. Whether it's mostly because it's school. But also as states begin to open, as the restrictions begin to loosen, we begin to see more reopening plans and what that entails. And I know, especially for those of us that are making decisions about schools, it feels a little bit like crunch time. You know, we kind of have to make our decisions and kind of get moving. Commit to one choice or the other, depending on what your school is offering. And so I'm sure that means that you, like I, are feeling the pressure, the pressure of those decisions kind of weighing you down. And there's still so much we don't know. I'm always struck as I read these reopening plans, this sort of mix between the uncertainty that we're all living with, and yet this attempt to feel to convey this sense of confidence. And we're all sort of caught in the midst of that. In the midst of those two extremes. For me, most of my decisions center around church and school. School for my daughter, and what continues to kind of be the plan for the church that I serve. Whether or not we'll open, when, how, if, all those questions. And those things will continue to be weighty decisions that we'll have to navigate over the coming months. And so first, let me acknowledge on behalf of all of us how hard this decision is. All of these decisions. We're making decisions on behalf of other people. We're making decisions that affect people's lives and livelihoods. We're making decisions with imperfect and incomplete information. It's just hard. It's just really, really hard. And so if you are feeling overwhelmed, if you're feeling weighed down by all of the decisions that are still, that are still undecided in your life, you're not alone. It's hard. It's really, really hard. And so let's talk a little bit about where we've been and what our next steps are. The first thing we talked about as we began to talk about difficult decisions was the commitment to pulling back from what I like to call not your business. Pulling back from everybody else's decisions, pulling back into and focusing just on you. Not worrying about what everybody else is doing, not arguing about what everybody else is doing, and pulling back from those spaces where you're getting pushback, where people are judging you, pulling back from the judgy places. First of all, because that helps kind of clear the air, clear the space. And second of all, because you don't need to be in those spaces in general. All the heartache in the world comes from me judging you and you judging me and us trying to figure out how to live together in peace. So pull back from the judgy spaces. That's what we talked about first. The second thing we did was that we cultivated a practice of silence and stillness. We cultivated this contemplative space. And we talked about how our minds are all muddy We talked about how our minds are all glittery. I had the glitter bottle, and we're talking about letting that stuff settle. Okay, getting clarity. This week we're talking about moving from distracted decisions to deliberate decisions to disciplined decisions. And we're gonna figure out what that means. But first, as always, I want to talk about something completely random, or at least seemingly random. Today I want to talk about sugary drinks. I know, bear with me. So I don't tend to drink a lot of sugary drinks. Usually I have a great big cup of tea in the morning with a little sugar in it, and then it's kind of water for the rest of the day. But I will confess that I really enjoy a good Arnold Palmer, which is half sweet tea and half lemonade for those of you that have not been introduced to the wonders that is the Arnold Palmer. I also like a good gin and tonic, but that's another story. But I have noticed during this pandemic that because I'm home more often, I find myself more than likely filling my cup with something other than water. It's tea, it's lemonade, it's tea and lemonade, it's a little soda, it's something other than water. And most of the time, that is a distracted decision. Even though I know that I do not want to make drinking sugary drinks a habit in my life. I'm just simply not thinking about it. I'm thinking about a million other things. Something's in the fridge, I grab it, I pour it into my cup, and I don't even think about it until later. Later I realize, oh, I haven't had enough water today. Or later I realize, I've had a little too much caffeine today. But in the actual decision-making process, I'm simply distracted. I'm not thinking about the decision. Now, a few times a month, we have pizza night in our house. And on pizza night, I don't make a distracted decision about sugary drinks. On pizza night, I make a deliberate decision. I really like to drink soda with pizza. It's about the only time I ever drink soda. So even though I don't want to make sugary drinks a habit in my life, I make a deliberate decision, one that actually goes against the values that I usually try to uphold. But I make a deliberate decision to have pizza with my soda. Soda with my pizza. But ideally, every time I go in the kitchen, I would be making a disciplined decision. A decision where I'm not only attentive rather than distracted. I'm not only attentive to the decision I'm making, but one where I'm also exercising discipline in making a choice that aligns with my values. So the movement from distracted decision to deliberate decision begins with greater clarity and mindfulness. Okay, so we moved from distracted decision, not really paying attention, to deliberate decision because of clarity and mindfulness. And guess what? Hooray! We've already done some of that work. We've already moved out the judginess. We've moved it out of our brains. We've made space in our brains that used to be taken up with judginess, ours or somebody else's, and we've made space. Then we also began instilling more clarity and stillness in our lives. So we're well on our way from distracted decisions to deliberate decisions. Now, that may not sound like a big step, but some days, if we think about the way we go about all the decisions that we make in life, some days that's a really big step. Now, to move from deliberate decisions to disciplined decisions, that requires that we apply our values. And again, this is something that the great spiritual traditions teach, but you don't have to ascribe to any particular tradition, a spiritual tradition, or any spiritual tradition at all to find value in this. In my tradition, sometimes we use the language of what we call testing the spirits. That actually is a phrase that comes from scripture. And it refers to seeing which things are true to the way God calls us to live in the world. It's not a complicated process. In fact, it's probably a process that you and I do all the time. But many times we don't think about it. It's just so automatic. But as many times as we do this process of testing the spirits or bringing our values to bear on our decisions, as many times as we do that, just as many times we're probably also making decisions that are sort of knee-jerk reactions, or emotional reactions, or not bringing our values to bear on those decisions. We've all done it. We all do it all the time. So let's think for a moment about your values. And those are going to be different for all of us. This is not a one-size-fits-all kind of a conversation. The values are going to be different for each and every one of us. If we were all to be in the same room together, we'd be having different conversations. If you're a healthcare provider, perhaps one of your values are the values laid out in the Hippocratic Oath. Perhaps your value is do no harm. If you come from the Judeo-Christian tradition, perhaps you'll use something like the scripture from the book of Micah, which is a commonly quoted one, as one of your values. And that scripture says, "What does the Lord require of us but to do justice and to love mercy and to walk humbly with God?" If you're a follower of Jesus, perhaps you gravitate to one of his teachings for the values of your life. Perhaps the Beatitudes. Those are some that people kind of gravitate towards sometimes. Or the probably the most famous one, the scripture where Jesus teaches that above all, what we should do. Oops, sorry, bumped you there. Above all, what we should do is to love God and to love our neighbor as ourselves. So. Again, your values are going to be different than my values, but first of all, what are your values? What values do you affirm? Not just with your mouth, but with your life. Because if we're affirming these values, not just with our mouths, but also with our lives, the people closest to us are going to be able to see the way those things manifest themselves in our lives, in our world. So, if, for example, let me give you an example. If I were to call up my very closest friend, the person who knows me best in the whole world, and I were to say something about, my value, my highest value in life is this thing. If her response was, "Really? That's your value?" then I probably need to look at my life and say, am I living that out so that other people can witness that? Or am I not? Am I just affirming it with my mouth and not with my life? But most likely, your values are so clear in your life that the people around you could probably state them as clearly as you could. But whatever value your life is built on, that's what you're going to bring into conversation with your decision, with its decision-making process. So you're going to be absolutely intentional in considering this decision alongside your values, the values that you want to affirm with the living of your life. It's the exact opposite of a knee-jerk reaction. It's not a distracted decision. It's a deliberate decision, but it's more than a deliberate decision. It's a disciplined decision. We have brought our decision within the parameters of the parameters that our values have set for us. Distracted decision, deliberate decision, disciplined decision. Now, the one thing we haven't talked about yet is about our community. Many times, even when we have done the work of eliminating judgment and quieting our minds and bringing our values into the conversation, even when we've done all that work, many times we still need help in making the decision. A pandemic is a perfect example. Without additional guidance and wisdom, unless you're an immunologist or somebody who studies viruses or a scientist of some sort or a medical professional of some sort, unless you've got that training and that background, most of us need additional guidance. We can quiet our minds all day long, but we're going to have to look for additional help. But we live in a pretty divisive culture. And the higher the stakes, the more divisive our culture gets. So how do we incorporate wisdom and good information into our process? Well, that's for next week. Sorry, it's just a big teaser for next week. No, seriously though, next week we are going to talk about what community looks like and how community is part of our decision-making process, an important part, a part we don't want to leave out. But also how community can strengthen our decision-making process, can strengthen the ways we live disciplined decisions, we live out our values, rather than constantly feeling like we're being attacked by community. There's a big difference between the culture we live in and what community can be for us. And we're going to talk about that next week. So for now, spend the week thinking about your values. If you had to write them down, what would you state your value, your highest value is? How does that value bear witness into this decision-making process? How does it affect the choices that you have in front of you? Think about that this week, and I will be back next week with Difficult Decisions Part 4, which will be our last week on difficult decisions. And in the meantime, be well, stay safe, and be blessed. Bye-bye.